yo, just waking up, trying to get warmed up before I go and hit the weights. Thought that I would talk about what it is that I went through last night. Dream state, where in essence, I had lived a whole nother life. I don't know for how many of you that is a common occurrence every time you enter slumber. But for me, it actually is, where it's like I wake up and it's just like, whoa. You know what I mean? It's like in the amount of detail and in the amount of experience that I have during dreams, waking up into reality is just like another dream, because it's just like, well, shit, here's another set of circumstances that I'm finding myself in. Obviously, in a lot of dreams, it's kind of like nonsensical situations, but to a certain degree, I can't help but feel like it's fairly similar in experience. And so sometimes I'm just like, well, shit, this is where I'm at. This is what I got to deal with. You know what I mean? Just like any dream. It's like you're just in a random set of circumstances and environments. And it's just like you just handle it, And it's like, this is what you remember. This is who you are. Now act the part. Play the part, So, last night, there was this place called the Glade. And in my mind, like during the experience, it was like some far off region of the planet, like, to the extent of being comparable to, I don't know, a European society. I live in America, so, going over there, and I was like taking trains, kind of wandering around and stuff like that. I had like a tour guide helping me out, and, I get really into the inland in regards to this place, and it was like this entire maze of sequences for me to get to this place, and I'm sitting there in my dream having to remember how it is that I got to where I'm at this point in time. And it's like this entire journey, you know what I mean? Like we took trains, we walked, we like paddleboarded across like some lakes. That's why it was called like the Glades, is because like there was like a foot of water like above this ocean bottom, so to speak, and it was like that for miles and miles around this place, this area. And everyone was just kind of like navigating across this little body of water, just like walking across it or like paddleboarding across it, or having boats or whatever, and there was settlements and like a little civilization that was inhabiting the area locally right here. And anyways, like I get real inland, and my guide, we go and see one of their friends that lives in the area, and then some other crazy stuff happens, and then all of a sudden, I'm by myself, and I have to find my way back, like get back on the train, like find my ticket, like show my ticket. I like lose it in the wind, and I have to like catch it, and like everything's moving, and I have to like go through and like grab it out of the air and then like hand it to the conductor or whatever, you know what I mean? And then the next thing I'm on like a cruise ship. And so just like craziness, you know what I mean? But it was like a full-fledged experience where like there was a set of rules, and there was an environment that was stable, and there were characters and personalities interacting with me and interacting with each other like off in the distance, just like, damn, you know what I mean? Like, why go into such great detail? But that's like a normal night in the life, so to speak, of my life, and that's not even going into that great of detail in regards to what happened. And then every once in a while I also dream about things that are very intertwined with my daily life, like I've been doing a lot of YouTube lately, so I was like having dreams about thoughts of what I could do on my channel, you know? And that's kind of like sprinkled in with everything else. I had like this really stupid idea. I watched this music video about Putin, and it's like this song Rasputin or whatever, you know what I mean, by what is it, Bone Me or something, some shit. No, it's like Boney whatever the name of that band is, where it's like, you know, Rasputin, the greatest lover of Russia, whatever, however the hell it goes. And I had this idea to have a thing of Putin, and this was like, you know, half awake type status here. The more I say it, the more stupid it becomes, and the more I just want to stop the recording and just not even talk about it and just go and do my daily routine. But having Putin, like, I saw a clip of him once in an interview with a newscaster saying like, I'm just here for the benefit of Russia, and it's like, whatever I can do to, you know, benefit Russia is what I'm going to do for the people and for the country. And then for some reason in my mind, I thought it was like the best idea to have like a still cut image of him after having a clip play of him saying that, like just being placed all around the map of Russia, and then just like making fart noises with each like motion that he made, like across the map. That was it. It's like the dumbest thing ever, dude. And then I had another thought. And this one's about like genetics, and also in a certain respect, history of ancient peoples and civilizations, where I'm always hearing people classify ancient peoples into a whole set, you know, of conditions which they apply to everybody in the time era. For example, you know, we go back 12,000 years and they say everybody's hunter-gatherer. Well, it's like, you do realize that people probably still were in like family units, right? And to say that there weren't like delegated tasks among the entirety of the family is, I think, to downplay how people today actually act as a unit. You know, not necessarily everybody is involved in one certain task or aspect. And even back in these ancient times, there were probably a separation. There was probably a separation that occurred between, you know, what people did in this unit. Like, for example, you probably had Sally over there, which weaved a lot. You probably had Jerry, which stared up at the stars all the time, you know what I mean? And you had Tom, which just went out and hunt because he knew that's what he needed to do, you know what I mean? And then, you know, someone that cooked and like all this different stuff. Like, you know, I don't necessarily think it was like everybody was a hunter-gatherer. It's like you're classifying the entirety of a people within one category within, you know, one set of conditions, when it's like in reality, I don't think that's how it was. And then they talk about like Göbekli Tepe, where it's like this ancient archaeological site, and they're like, oh whoa, how all of a sudden did people start doing this, you know what I mean? And it's like they're like, maybe we underestimated hunter-gatherers and like all this different stuff. I'm like, you guys are idiots. It's like, not every single person was a hunter-gatherer. Like, you don't think that just because based off of personality, some people like fed other individuals because they like to have them around. They're almost like a little bit of a mooch, but you know, maybe they're like enjoyable to talk to. So that's like their form of, I guess, you know, that's like their way of contributing to the group, is through like social interaction and being able to contemplate and think and stuff like that. I mean, people do that shit today. It's like, you know what I mean? Oh, Bob over there doesn't do shit, but yeah, he's sure a hoot to be around, you know what I mean? So it's like people put up with him, right? I'm sure there was fucking people like that back in the day too. So it's like, you know, to be amazed at all the shit. It's not like everybody had no time to do anything and everybody was out fucking hunting and gathering and like all this different stuff. It's like, I'm sure that there was like delegated roles and tasks, like even when you were hunting, you know what I mean? Like you watch wolves fucking hunt, which, you know, obviously predatory animals have been hunting for a fucking long ass time, and they still have like delegated roles during the whole hunt, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, to think that it was any different back then is, I think, a fool's way of thinking. But then also they say like there was no ancient civilization like 12,000, you know, years plus ago, but then it's like the site's dated to 12,000 years plus ago, and it's like, no, they were still hunter-gatherers. Well, it's like, at what point in time do you call a people's something else? Because I feel like, you know what I mean, like this is the point in time where you call them something else. You don't call them that anymore. Like, you know what I mean? There's obviously definitions, and then there's gray areas of transitionary periods where people transition from one definition to the next, you know? And I feel like this is definitely one of those moments where people transition. And it's like, they're no longer this, they're not quite that. But obviously, they've been building up this knowledge for some time now, because it's not like all of a sudden people just woke up and went and did it. You know what I mean? It's like the society in general has been communicating and organizing and possibly passing on knowledge through some other form than you're aware of, because the evidence is here. It's like they say there's no evidence for, you know, them doing this thing. Well, it's like, obviously you have to conclude that this stuff was going on in the background, even if you're not finding the hard evidence, because like there's this monumental structure here which kind of, you know, alludes to the fact that other stuff is going on, and that for possibly generations people have been building up to this moment to be able to accomplish this. It's not just like all of a sudden they just do it, you know what I mean? Like that's just not how it happens. So obviously they're not how you thought they were, you know. And also with people like categorizing like all these ancient sacrificial people into being like these freaking demonic worshipers, you know what I mean? I think it's really kind of stupid, and doing the same thing where it's like these people are kind of idiots back then. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, you're an idiot because I don't necessarily know if you could go out, make your shelter every single night and go and hunt and follow wildlife through the mountains, know where they're gonna go every single year and season, and track them and make fire and make clothes, all this shit, you know what I mean? And obviously there's probably some delegation going on, but still, it's like, at what point in time is intelligence merely an act given the environment rather than kind of what they're defining intelligence to be? Because if we look at intelligence in a different way, then these people are definitely intelligent, you know what I mean? It's not like they're just Neanderthal idiots. Like, the ability to go off and survive alone in an environment or whatever, like they say a lot of these people did, is definitely an act of intelligence. So to say they're stupid is stupid. But, you know, if we look at ancient historical figures and then we apply the same mindset that they had during the time of them ruling peoples, then why would we not apply the same mindset to these ancient rulers which adhered to like sacrificial ceremonies and what have you, where it's like, you know, maybe there's a subset of the population which truly does believe in what's going on. Maybe there's a subset of the population which questions and doesn't necessarily believe. It's not like every single person in the entire, you know, society was like some, you know, sacrificially hungry, demonic retard or whatever. It's like how they, you know, bloodthirsty idiot, you know what I mean? It's like we read Julius Caesar's book, and even in his book he's hinting to the notion that he's obviously using methodology to control his society that he's ruling over. Like, he's using ceremony and all this different stuff, and he's using, you know, what we would today considered to be like manipulative, fake news or what have you, to psychologically, I guess, pull the society in the way that you want them to go. These people are doing this. So why don't we say or ever think that it's like, you know what, it's possible that there are some people in this society, possibly ancient rulers and leaders, which used sacrificial ceremony to elicit control over the people, because it's like, if we don't have a blood sacrifice every year, then the crops won't grow and we won't have food. Well, it's like, obviously the society is built off of a hierarchy, right? So how is it the people at the top maintain power and control? Because the people at the bottom are the ones that are doing a majority of the thing. Obviously you can say there's some, symbiotic relationship going on here, because everybody is supposedly enjoying the pleasures of civilization and society, and you need delegation and certain tasks to accomplish society, because this person up here can kind of see further and far beyond than this person down here, so they can kind of, help to like level out the society and keep it moving forward in some aspect, because they can see and are working on different problems, right? You know what I mean? So there's some symbiotic relationship going on there, and then everybody is supposedly supposed to benefit, upon the hierarchy of civilization itself. But to say that at certain times that certain people don't necessarily take advantage of that, I think is a fool's way to think. But who's to say that in these ancient sacrificial societies that some people up here, just like we know about people doing today, utilize religion and ceremony to elicit control over the people? And it's like they're thinking to themselves, yeah, I don't necessarily think that blood sacrifice is going to cause the crops to grow, but I do know what causes the crops to grow, and that's the people actually sacrificing their time for the betterment of me and my position and everybody else that isn't out in the fields working, to put in the work and effort into the crops to make them grow and harvest them for my own benefit. So you know what I mean? It's like the sacrificial ceremonies are metaphoric, and it's like a parabolic way to get people to sacrifice themselves for the cause of society, right? And who's to say that people didn't necessarily think or understand that way? And you know what I mean? To say that there is no effect of having these ceremonies take place on the human psyche is also foolish as well, where it's like, you know what I mean? People are like, they think about the whole sacrificial ceremonies that people did before they went into battle, like in these ancient civilizations. Like, to say that they had no effect on the people participating in them is stupid. Like, you think how much like more focused you would be on the present and the now and what's going on if you participated in some crazy sacrificial ceremony where it gives you like a heightened sense of experience, because dude, somebody just lost their life right in front of you and all this different stuff, and there's like crazy stuff going on. And you know what I mean? It's like going to like a concert or something to that extent, where it's like this huge gathering of people and everybody's doing this certain thing. It draws you into the experience, makes you more aware of it and all this different stuff. So to say that it has no effect on the people, like, who knows? Like, the mindset that it actually created, history itself justifies a lot more horrific actions, I think, than just these sacrifices, right? We have like conquerors going all throughout the land, conquering different things, and historians will say like, yeah, he killed a lot of people, but in doing so he set up the road which made all this other stuff possible, so it kind of justifies itself. Like, who's to say that a lot of these things that went on, which we disapprove of today, are actually the beneficial cause for different successes in differing societies, where it created the mindset necessary for them to accomplish certain things within these times. And I think that's where a lot of people, think incorrectly, and they call people and things stupid, and they classify an entire category of people into one individual classification, and it's like, that's incorrect. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think that it's beneficial to go down the road of gray area all the time, but I think that you need to acknowledge it before you begin an exercise into actually contemplating as to how things were or how things are. Otherwise, you're, saying that they aren't that way at all. I think that's incorrect to think. Another thing that I was thinking about was, technology and the manifestation of technology in the lives of humans and the appearances of technology in human civilizations. I was kind of wondering, is ingenuity something which is ingrained within our code as human beings, where it's obviously there's this huge thing of nature and nurture, right, where it's the huge bipolar yin and yang of how biologists and geneticists look at the growth of a population and speciation, where it's the nature kind of influences the nurture, and the nurture kind of influences the nature of the beast, right? Because when we look at the human experience, humans themselves are kind of an odd thing, but a lot of other creatures do this as well. They alter their environment, and in altering their environment, they alter what is best suited in a certain environment. So it's kind of like we're playing a role in our, advancement. And that's what I want to talk about, is what people specify as advanced. I heard somebody say the other day, they were talking about the ancient, South American civilizations, and they're like, how are these people so advanced but they didn't even have the will, right? I think that they're mixing up, just like I was talking about earlier, kind of delegating everybody into this big old pot of category. They're mixing up what it actually means to be advanced, because I don't necessarily think that specific technologies determine something as being advanced. It's like saying I'm more smart than a bird, but you know what I mean? If we look at the collective intelligence of an experience that a bird goes through in actually successfully completing action in an environment, a bird can fly, I can't. And in that regards, a bird is more intelligent than I am, or a blue whale can dive down to the bottom of whatever, you know what I mean? It's those things are intelligent in themselves, being able to perform in a specific environment. It's intelligence is much more than just a very minute part of the body, the brain. It's intelligence is the whole acting being able to accomplish a certain task. And so it's when we look at the environment itself, sure, they didn't have wills. And actually scholars will debate this, because they had children's toys which used wills and all this other technology, but for some reason or other they didn't actually or there's no evidence that they incorporated the will into their society. And they say that's one big reason, as to why the conquistadors conquered these societies, that and domesticated animals. But you have to look at what is life experience. I don't necessarily think that technology itself is a direct comparison to experience. I don't think that we can say technology is up here, and so we draw a line over here and say experience is up here as well. I don't necessarily think that it goes that way. And I think that the proving factor to that point is all we have to do is look back upon our life in our childhood, and we feel the experience of that moment, of that time. And it's not necessarily something which is directly relational or quantifiable in regards to the technology present. It definitely has a different feel, right? And let's say that there's a society which is based upon only the feeling that you gain from experiencing that society, right? Who's to say what the best feeling society is and what the technology within that society houses? I mean, we have people today that practice this, right? We have Amish communities and all this different stuff where they say the human experience is actually something which becomes, detracted once we have all this technology introduced. So they actually limit their own technology within society. To say that advancement is directly comparable to experience is, I think, also a fallacy. Where I think, you know what I mean? It's like we say they didn't have the will, but maybe it was like something to the respect where they actually didn't purposefully utilize certain things, because think about how much that changes in your life if there's wills involved. All of a sudden, the movement of things transitions entirely in the entirety of the whole civilization. So who's to say that they weren't trying to maintain some certain aspect or feel within a society and civilization? And this technology took away from the feel. Just like when you look back on your youth and you think about a specific time in your life when the technology was different, it's not necessarily like it was any worse, or it might even be better than you feel today. And maybe there's some other factors involved, like your age change and stuff like that, but obviously you can look back and kind of have a nostalgic feeling in regards to how things were and how they are today. And you can look at the feeling that you had during these moments of your life in regards to the environment. And you can say, yeah, I could actually see that maybe certain peoples didn't necessarily incorporate certain things into their society because they were trying to maintain what it is that they felt was the experience that they wanted to house within this society. And so we have to ask ourselves that as well. What is advancement? What is this thing of life? And if the purpose of life is experience, then who's to say that these people weren't actually intellectually trying to adhere to what that is and accomplish the utmost of experience for their people? And they thought that these certain things detracted from that, so they didn't necessarily incorporate them into their society, right? So there's another thing that we have to take into consideration. And the last thing that I want to touch upon goes back to the nature versus nurture and the intrinsic, knowledge which is stored within our being. And it's this very fine line of, technology overcomes problems. But how are problems created? Is the problem always there? The problem may not have always been there. Like, the technology could have always been there, but the spurring moment to bring forth the technology is when a problem presents itself. And so we have the technology come forth. And, we look at this planet Earth, which is a thing floating through space. And, its position is constantly changing in regards to its position in the universe. And as it does so, the people upon the face of it are changing as well. It's like time itself is a specific place, because if we go back to this certain time, everything was in a different position. So traveling to where things are in regards to that specific position will find us, and we will be located in another time. And to say that, I guess technology is something which is independent of like a civilization's position. Like, I'm going down this whole road of where I think a lot of scholars don't like to go, because obviously you're opening up the world to a lot more color and questions, which I feel like a lot of scholars and scientists kind of try to veer away from, because they like there to be, some sort of statute, concrete way to view the world and walk upon. Otherwise, you're kind of just free falling. But I think if you just embrace the fact that life is like this, instead of free falling like a lot of them think, when the concrete crumbles beneath their feet, you can actually, take flight and soar through the skies, so to speak. But I was thinking, like, is all of this technology that we come across intrinsically ingrained within our genetic code, so to speak? And it's like, there are certain peaks or things coming into being on the planet, like at certain times based upon the environment, but we're also dual creators of the environment. And so different species actually within their being, what categorizes them as different species, because this is going to be kind of like, a very teeter-totter thing to talk about here, because what actually categorizes a species is obviously their genetic makeup. But, what kind of plays into the role of what their genetic makeup is their environment. And so, how connected is the technology that certain, I guess, we could look at humans as just one example of this, right? Because obviously we look across and back throughout the timeline, and we have genetic differences of populations of humans. How much of a species, and we're talking about humans here, I'm sure it applies to other things as well, how much of a species is directly relational in their genetic coding to the actual forms of technology that they utilize in their daily lives? To say that there is an extreme connection and correlation with the technology that comes about within reality is due to the actual intrinsic genetic code might not be so far-fetched of a thing. But it's like, from which point of view are we looking at this from? Are we looking at it from, there's a thing which creates a form of technology which changes lifestyle, and then over time it changes the population and speciation occurs. And so what happens is we have a form of being which is directly connected to the technology present because their being is now somewhat dependent upon it. Or if we look at this more of like through an ethereal lens, kind of like a mystical, magical type of lens, more so than kind of like a rational one, where we have this object floating through space and it's occupying different points in time, right? Well, this specific species comes about through this specific environment, but the genetic code of this thing in a certain sense is actually directly connected to the technology that's present. So who's to say that the technology isn't necessarily a byproduct of internal genetic programming? And then we can look at all the technology present, and it's like you look out at your daily life, at the world, and you think to yourself, like, this is just our species. You know what I mean? Like, this is the species of man. And I hear a lot of historians kind of say like, oh, the human is something which is, kind of unique in the sense that like you take a human, from 12,000 years ago, plug them in today's society, and like it will function perfectly. But I'm not necessarily certain, as to how true that is. Like I think that to some degree, what's present on the planet is due to what's present on the planet, right? And if we actually look at the genetic information of people from long ago to people today, there is significant difference. And according to evolution, the genetic makeup of a thing is based upon what is most suited or fit for the environment. And when things form the environment that is most suitable for a specific fitness, then they are in a way controlling their evolutionary pathway. And so when we think about, the possibility that specific populations internally within their DNA, right, will actually come across or create certain things which are most suitable for them, because everything's fighting for life. So if you're born in a certain manner, then your entire life is going to be based upon making life the best possible life for you. And if you know that you have certain factors which I guess kind of are limiting for you in comparison to everything else competing for life, then you're going to find a way around that. You're going to use your other faculties and facilities to compensate for that fact. And so in doing so, and all those things are a product of your internal genetic code, your speciation, your species. So you're going to find a way to accomplish all this task, and in doing so, the byproduct of that is the technology that you utilize. And if we look at ancient peoples, their makeup, their everything was entirely different. Their genetic code is different. You know what I mean? It's like people might say it's like, oh, it's only a point whatever % difference, but do you realize how much of a difference that actually makes? It's like, yeah, even people today have like a 0.000 whatever % difference, but that's the difference between somebody of a different skin color and you, and height and eye color and hair color and all that stuff. That's huge. That's huge. And to say that, you know what I mean, there's more of a difference between you and the people back then, that's huge. That difference is huge, you know what I mean? You get in an airplane and you, right, as the old analogy goes, you know, you fly a degree off your course from your initial point of departure, you're going to end up somewhere totally different, you know what I mean? That little difference is huge when we're talking about such huge events and huge populations of people. So to think that technology is something which is present internally within our DNA, I don't necessarily think is super far-fetched, because where does all knowledge come from anyways? We're all a part of the grand knowledge of everything, you know what I mean? And so to think that we're all internally capable of manifesting what it is that we are externally, I don't think is too, you know, far-fetched of a leap. So yeah, man, I got going there. I'm gonna go exercise now. It's kind of warmed up. The sun has came out. Got everything off my mind that I felt like I needed to. Kind of took me a little bit longer to say it than I wanted to, but I feel like I appropriately got everything out in a manner which could be understood if everybody, you know, gives it some time and soaks in what I said, so to speak. Because when you're trying to talk about something which you've just kind of thought about and conceptualized about, it's a little bit difficult to actually arrange it in a form of speech which is understandable and can possibly lead people down the line of thinking that you yourself have went through. And so that's kind of what I just barely experienced, was that moment of, you know, I haven't written any of this down or anything like that. It's just been thoughts. So yeah, later. Yo, what's up? Just got done with my workout. Time to preach. Called this post-workout preaching. I already got my pre-workout preaching in, so now it's time for the post-workout preaching. And if you're wondering where it is that I am gaining all of, I guess, this inspiration for what I've been talking about lately, most importantly, or in most regards to history, I've been listening to a lot of like Dan Carlin lately. And I've been listening to like people, you know, like Joe Rogan for some time now, but I just kind of stumbled across Dan Carlin and his Hardcore History series. And that's what really has kind of prompted me towards, you know, talking about the things that I've been talking about as of late. So I would, you know, definitely recommend, if you're somebody who's into history, but then, you know, the telling of history as a story and as of something that's in its own sense entertaining, right? Because if we look at like the dry sense of history, it's like there's a, you know, a dot here, and a dot here, and it's like there's date, event. Well, Dan does a great job at stringing all of the events together into one fluid story in motion that you can enjoy listening to. And that's what I've enjoyed about it. And, you know, it's hard for me, because I'm a very opinionated person, to just kind of sit down and sit back and listen to something. But, you know, I can almost do it with Dan. There are some times where it's like, dang, I just want to like voice my opinion and have a conversation and, you know what I mean? Like, say what I want to say. And I guess that's why I have these vlogs, so that I can do that. You know, all those moments throughout my life where it's like, I want to say something about this, but, you know, there's really nobody around to talk to about it, or nobody that's interested. I can kind of document my thoughts in regards to what's going on. And that's kind of, you know, one reason why I do these vlogs. And he said something the other day which I just felt like I wanted to, like, you know, chime in on. And I understand that a lot of times people think the same way that you might be thinking. But the thing about it is for the sake of sanity and for the sake of life itself, you know, for Pete's sake, you can't necessarily divulge into every single aspect and facet of everything. And it's just like with history, we gain glimpses here and there, but we could spend our entire life learning every single event that ever occurred. It's the same thing with conversation, you know what I mean? It's like we catch glimpses and moments of what's kind of important and stuff like that to gain a broader sense of understanding. It's the same thing with history. If we were to spend all our time dwelling on history, we could literally spend up the entirety of our life on it, because much more has happened than is going to happen during our life, so to speak. So it's like, in that sense and in those regards, it's like I don't ever go on the offensive in regards to anything that I gotta say in regards to anybody that I'm listening to, because you never know. It's just like they're just talking. Obviously they can't dive into every single well, you know what I mean? Otherwise you're gonna freaking drown, So yeah, just one of the things he was talking about as of late was like hunter-gatherer societies, and he was talking about this with this guy that does a podcast called History on Fire, Daniele Buyelli or something like that, I don't know. And they were talking about ancient, I guess, civilizations like those found in North America, the Western United States. And they were saying like, are all, I guess, hunter-gatherer societies like these peaceful peoples and stuff like that? And then Dan came in and said no, because you have the Apache and all these other stuff, which were definitely aggressive, I guess, warrior-based societies. But at what point in time do we classify something as a farming, I guess, or hunting and gathering society? Because at some point in time, depending on their actions and the way in which they acquire subsistence, they're no longer falling under that categorization. If literally they are compensating for their lack of, I guess, hunting, gathering, or farming by raiding, then they are more so of a warrior or a militarized state than an actual hunting and gathering society and civilization. So, you know what I mean? It might actually be correct to say that all true, farming societies are peaceful. Because as soon as they're doing something else, then they no longer fall into that categorization. As soon as, they subsist upon another pathway of life, then we have to ascribe to them another category to define what it is that they are. And they're no longer this. They may be a hybrid of the two, but they're no longer, purist in this sense anymore. And, wow, is that really all I got to say? One more thing that I wanted to talk about that, was sparked by listening to Dan Carlin was in his Blueprints for Armageddon series, where he speaks a lot about PTSD and how a lot of people didn't necessarily believe it was a thing, before, I guess, World War I. And he said that the atrocities of this war itself, made people rethink, what, I guess, PTSD is. And I kind of had something that I wanted to say about that as well. Because if we look at ancient societies and civilizations, people were pretty much, involved in warfare for a large portion of their life. And it wasn't necessarily something which was departmentalized like it is today, right? If we look at a lot of these ancient warring societies, every single person in the tribe or in the colony, whatever have you, was participating in warfare at some point in time where they had probably taken somebody's life. Now, we relate that to, I guess, early 20th century warfare. And we look at the environment and the situation which presents itself before us at this moment. It's extremely different because people go off to war and then they come back, and it's extremely compartmentalized. There are a lot of people which don't experience what everybody else went through in regards to the atrocities of what they experienced. So when they come back and relay these experiences, what happens is there's a point of not being able to share the experience with other people. And in doing so, the experience is heightened in that it is much more, I guess, rare in occurrence, meaning that it takes precedence when analyzing somebody's life. And society itself will either exalt or demoralize people, in regards to the traumatic experience based upon the traumatic experience itself, right? So if everybody has gone to war, then the experience itself isn't that traumatic in regards to, society analyzing it. And you don't have all these people breathing down your neck saying, whoa, and the unconscious actions of people in regards to your surrounding and vicinity treating you in a certain way actually feeding the condition itself, because they look at you and view you as something which has went through something very extreme. And it makes me wonder, is traumatic experience actually relative to the conditions of a society? Because if we go back far enough and everybody was participating in this behavior, it's not a traumatic experience because everybody can relate. Everybody can talk to each other about it. Now, that being said, there are surely other experiences which aren't necessarily in the normal, set of boundaries for this society that people go through at certain points in times. And these experiences can either exalt people in regards to the event being relayed to the rest of the mass, or they can demoralize and dehumanize people and pretty much, ostracize them from the populace, because people look at it and they think of it as something of, like a negative experience. And so the effect that it has on the person, is it more so the actual experience itself, or is it the reactions of society and knowledge that this person went through this thing? And in doing so, they treat this person in a different manner, and they actually create the condition itself. In the analysis, you might say that the analysis is something which is non-intrusive, but you're placing somebody in an environment, you're heightening the experience by, letting them know that it is something of a traumatic sense, because if it wasn't, why would they be placed in this environment? Why would they be given this, I guess, special treatment if it wasn't something that was a special event? And in so doing, you're actually causing and creating, what we would deem as something of a traumatic experience, because you're saying it is traumatic. And if everybody's gone through it, it's not. And so in that sense, how much of these disorders are actually created, not necessarily by the experiences that people go through, but by the society and the experiences that are felt upon society itself. If everybody's going through this continually and at some point in time in their life, then it's something which everybody can connect upon, and it's no longer a traumatic experience. So in that sense and in those regards, how much of this PTSD was more so, in regards to World War I, due to the fact that society at that point in time was much more delegated and compartmentalized, where there were a lot of people which couldn't, sympathize with the experiences because they had never gone through anything like that in their life. But, in doing so, they heighten the experience for the other individuals that have gone through it, because, you either elevate somebody based upon the experiences, or you, like I said, you can demoralize them. And this is of course, I guess, intrinsic of the experience and the experiences of the society in question. But yeah.